Turbine Guy coming back at you once again, Orono City Hall. And boy, oh boy, was it ever a crazy meeting last night. If you want to see any of the footage from last night, the Turbine Guy live streamed all of it. The video's linked in the description. Just go down there and click on it. The Orono Council finally decided to part ways. Well, let's not say finally, because this has been in the works a while. And they've gone down this road of screw Long Lake. We're going to have our own fire department. And by the way, they finally admitted, yes, it is going to cost us more money every year. And this is just a preliminary estimate, just like the Public Works building. Preliminary at, I don't know, 8 or 10 million, end up at 18 million. Fire department's going to be there too, for sure. It got to a point that the Long Lake firefighters were so upset, you know, an item or two was literally hurled at the Orono City Council. Why? Because the council wouldn't let them speak. They would not let members of the Long Lake Fire Department speak last night before they chose to stab him in the back. But that's just part of the story. Because the firemen stayed around and they wanted to speak during public comments. But no. Because specifically, two people were getting up and going back and forth with the audience, and Richard Crosby himself decided to insert himself and yell and scream at the people during public comments. Now, they always say at the beginning of public comments, we're not going to respond. You're on your own. But Richard Crosby thought it was his position as a council member to lay into members of the public and literally scream and yell at them.
Orono meetings on a constant basis when you don't live in the city. It's ridiculous.
And when that was going on, boom, they ended public comments, ended the meeting right there, and that was the end of that. But that's not even the big story of what happened last night. Because before the meeting, they had a work session where the Turbine Guy, myself, and a number of others all had 10 minutes in which to be interviewed for the vacant city council seat position that Victoria Seals resigned from just recently. And, you know, the interviews went really well, and it sure sounded to me that there were a bunch of competent people who could really step in and make a change in this community. But that's not what happened. The Orono Council, believe it or not, well, of course you believe it, because what's there not to believe with these guys these days? They came out when it was time, and they literally made a motion for a person who wasn't even here to be interviewed, who supposedly was interviewed over the phone, seconded right away, and refused to discuss the other candidates. They absolutely refused to discuss. And then, boom, they appointed this person. Now, you may want to think, hey, you know what? Let's talk about these candidates. Let's go back and forth on some good and bad points. You know, let's work as a council to come to agreement on what's best. But even though Miss Benson up here, Councilwoman Benson, was trying to do that, saying, I'd like to talk about all the candidates, she was hammered and shut down. Why, you say? I'll tell you why. Because Crosby, Walsh, and Matt Johnson were all in the bathroom after the interviews with nobody else there, making up their own mind without Miss Benson present. Literally, I walked into the bathroom, was walking in, and those three were there and nobody else. So there wasn't going to be no public discussion. I don't think there ever was going to be. Turbine Guy certainly thinks that this was an entire sham put out to mollify the public. And why do I say that? Because the public was not happy. There were a number of people who got up and spoke over Walsh, who was trying, out of order. Isn't that Dennis Walsh? Out of order. Now, of course, he didn't do that to Crosby when Crosby was out of order, screaming at the public. But out of order, talked over. These people, these candidates, were upset that they weren't even going to be discussed. They themselves considered the entire process a sham, from what I could tell. And there are now a number of people that I don't think will ever vote for any of them. Well, the fix was in. I knew it ahead of time. I think a lot of you did too. They were going to pick who they picked. They picked someone who didn't even show up. Yeah, she was on vacation, whatever. They could have altered the process. There's a lot of things they could have done other than go through the charade of interviews. Because it's really funny, because Crosby came up and tried to shake my hand and say, oh, I'm really glad that you applied. Crosby ain't glad for nothing at all. Crosby seconded in the motion, didn't want any discussion on anybody else. The choice was made before anybody got here at 4 o'clock yesterday for the interviews to start. Well, who's surprised out there? Certainly not the turbine guy, and most likely not you. One more corrupt night at City Hall. Turbine guy, signing off.